Greetings, everyone. Nice to see you all again. And if you would do me the honor of raising your hand if you are within the sound of my voice. Neil Amadova, welcome back. Nice to see you again. Elizabeth, Amy, Ann, Shamala, Alistair, Shana. Is it Shana or Shanna? Thea, Kate. Oh, wait a minute. Your names are bouncing all over the place. When you raise your hands, your names bounce around on my screen. So, okay. You can hear me. Lower hands, lower hands. Thank you very much. How are you doing? It's nice to see you here once again. I am very, very long A. Thank you, Shana. I'm very happy once again to be spending this time with you. I am even happier still. I'm glad you're glad to see me. I am even happier still that you are here with me. It's very, very nice. It's a great honor that you choose to spend your time with me on these Thursday evenings. Some of you may be new, it seems, so welcome. I'm Hari-kirtana, and this is our Bhagavad-gita Satsang. I'm very happy that you're here, and I hope that our discussion this evening will help to unlock some of the secrets hiding in plain sight that the Bhagavad-gita contains. I want for all of us to gain a deeper understanding and relationship with the Bhagavad-gita as a result of having this dialogue. I want it to be a dialogue, so please avail yourselves to the Q&A box in order to ask questions. If you have any issues with the audio, please let me know in the Q&A box, or the video for that matter. And let's go ahead and do a little bit of screen sharing with you. So I think we just covered everything. By the way, if you're new, don't worry about your microphone or your video. You can see me, for better or for worse, and I cannot see or hear you, so don't think that that's just some license to multitask. I'll know. Last week, we continued with Karma Yoga, the exemplary actions and Krishna's own example of exemplary action, using himself as the example. We also talked about that if what you're doing is not perceived as helping by those you are trying to help, then it's not helping, and one should desist from that kind of action. We'll revisit that idea this evening. We covered verses 21 through 26 of the 3rd chapter. And in tonight's episode, more Karma Yoga, because we're still in the 3rd chapter, and that's the name of this chapter, is Karma Yoga. We'll talk about confused action, disciplined action, and the results of each of these kinds of actions from the standpoint of yoga. We're covering texts 27 through 32 of the 3rd chapter of Bhagavad-gita. We will begin with the verse that we will chant this evening. So for those of you who are joining us for the first time, there's always at least one verse that we chant in call and response fashion, which is to say that I will chant the verse and then give you time to chant it back. I will do this one line at a time. So I'll chant the first line, you chant the line back, second line, you chant it back, etc. We are using diacritical marks in the transliterated Sanskrit, transliterated meaning Sanskrit as it appears in the Roman alphabet, but with indications in the form of these marks that are pronunciation cues. So the dot under the R indicates that the R has a R sound. So it's actually a vowel in Sanskrit. The dot under the H only comes into play if the dot under the H is at the end of a word that's at the end of a line. The bar above the A indicates what is in Sanskrit is a long A, which is not an A sound, but an ah sound, a very open, elongated ah, as opposed to a short sound, which is the A without the bar. The apostrophe or accent mark over the S indicates it's a deep SH sound, which is to say it's an SH that's pronounced all the way in the back of your mouth. You kind of have to make that terrible face in order for the sound to be right. See what you can do. Now the dot under the H pops up at the end of the line of the second line. So in this case, we'll echo the vowel that precedes the H back. So instead of just sarvasha, it'll be sarvashaha. Let's see. The dot under the D indicates that the D isn't just right behind your teeth, as we would normally do this in English, duh, but it's further back in the middle of your mouth, and you're going to bounce the tip of your tongue off the roof of your mouth back in the middle. Duh. I think that covers it. Here we go. Prakrite kriyamanani gunai karmani sarvashaha ahankara vimhudhatma kartaham iti manyate. Usually I do this once. I go through each line once. If you'd like for me to do it again so that you have another shot at chanting this verse, let me know. Just toss something into the Q&A box. We'll come back to this. Meanwhile, let's look at the translation. This is actually an oft-quoted verse in the Bhagavad-gita, precisely because it is a very important verse. It explains a lot in a single verse. Here's your translation. One who is bewildered by the influence of false ego thinks, I am the doer of activities. In actuality, all activities are carried out by the three qualities of material nature. So this is the essence of illusion. Krishna encapsulates it in this single verse, the idea that we think I'm the one who's making things happen. It's all happening because of me. And this occurs when we misidentify ourselves with matter. And the false ego, the influence of false ego is cited here as the culprit. Ego is in the category of matter insofar as Vedic yoga philosophical thought is concerned. We normally don't think of the ego as being matter because it's not a solid, a liquid, radiant energy. It's not a gas. It's not space. It's nothing that exists within the realm of natural sciences. You can't empirically measure it. It's also totally invisible to us. That is to say, my false ego is something I cannot see. You can see it. It's probably like a big neon sign right across my forehead, but I can't see it. And that's usually the case for most of us. Our false ego is invisible to us, clearly visible to everybody else. And under the influence of this sense of false identification, we think I'm doing things. And this is actually illusion. It is the qualities of material nature that is doing the doing. The self proper, the person. Sleepy, sleep, sleep. Not engaged at all, not involved. The same way that a person who is sleeping is not involved in their dream. They're lying in bed asleep. Let's go back and chant this one more time. Then we're going to go through the whole rest of this section, which will put this verse in a little additional context. And then we'll come back and go deeply into each verse, as is our usual habit. So, let's go back. Whoop. Here we go. Whoop. No, the other way. There we go. All right, so we're going to chant this one more time. Everyone gets another chance to play with the Sanskrit. So here we go. Prakrite kriyamanani gunai karmani sarvashaha ahankara vimudhatma kartaham iti manyate. So this is chanted to an 8-syllable meter. And while the melody may change, you may have heard this verse chanted differently. You may have heard me chant these verses in a different melody if you've been with us before. But the meter is based on the fact that there are 8 syllables per quarter verse or per line. So while we're here at the Sanskrit, let's take a closer look at how this verse relates, how the Sanskrit relates to the translation. And Neelamadava, I've got your question. I'm going to come back to it. Just so you know, I see it. I got it. We'll come back. Prakrite, or prakriti, material nature. Kriya, action. So the actions of material nature, how are they being carried out? Gunai, or guna, the gunas, the 3 qualities of material nature: goodness, passion, and ignorance. They are interacting with one another. And we're thinking that this is me doing stuff. Ahankara is the word for false ego. So ahankara is a compound word made up of aham, I, kara, doer. Kara has the same root as karma, action, kriya, action. All these words having to do with doing are these Ka words, kara, or Ki words, kriya. So the very definition of false ego is the illusion of being the one who is making it happen. I'm the one who's making it happen. So now the question arises, well, you know, if I'm not the doer of activities, and in actuality, all these activities are carried out by the 3 qualities of material nature, then where does our free will pop in? Is there any freedom of action? Surprisingly, not much. We think that we make decisions and we're the ones making the decision, and it's based on our free will. So, for example, by my free will, I can choose whether or not I take a drink of water. Or whether I will have plain water or fizzy water. However, I have absolutely no idea how the desire to move my arm, pick up the glass, and bring it to my mouth translates into the mechanics of my body actually doing it. You can explain how it happens, at least insofar as the material elements previously mentioned, solids, liquids, radiant energy, gases, and space, combine together to perform, create the potential for movement, for objects existing, and my ability to lift the glass. But the will, how my will connects to these things, is a philosophical question that requires understanding consciousness, and consciousness is beyond the purview of material science. Usually what happens is we look to the effect in order to find the cause, which is to say we look for biomechanical causes for metaphysical effects. And yoga actually regards this as inside-out thinking. So the water is a material element produced by the three qualities of material nature. In fact, all of the material elements that make up my body, that make up the glass, that make up the water, are derivative of the three qualities of material nature. My digestive system that is now interacting with the water that I drank is a product, fire is a product of the three qualities of material nature. Thirst, the idea that I would get the very notion that I need something to drink. That's a product of the qualities of material nature. You know, my body, which is made of material elements, is dried out, and my mind receives an impulse from the senses, both of which are in the category of prakriti, and therefore the message is sent: find water, deliver water to the mouth so it can go to the stomach, so it can be distributed to the material body. Well, all that is happening as a result of the modes of material nature interacting with themselves. What am I doing? Well, technically, I'm not doing anything. My consciousness is currently projected into this field of material nature, and therefore, I think I'm the one who's doing it. This goes to likes and dislikes as well. We think I can choose to buy this particular recording of piece of music instead of that piece of music. But how are your likes and dislikes determined? Do you choose to like a particular piece of music? No, you hear it and you like it, or you hear it and you dislike it. And what is it that determines whether or not you like or dislike a piece of music? The particular combination of the modes of material nature that influence your consciousness. It's not your choice. So our free will shows up only insofar as we have chosen to identify with matter. And once that choice is made, almost everything else that follows is this. Actions that we think are our own are actually being carried out by the three qualities of material nature interacting with themselves. And the illusion is we think, I'm making it happen. I hope that answers your question. All right, let's go through the balance of our verses for this evening, put the whole thing in a little more context, blow it up a little bit. Here we go. So chapter 3, verse 28. Krishna still speaking to Arjuna. But one who knows the truth about how material nature generates action remains detached, O mighty armed Arjuna, knowing well that it is only the qualities of material nature that are interacting with one another. Text 29. Those who are bewildered by the influence of material nature become attached to material activities. The wise should not disturb those who are fooled into identifying with material nature due to a poor fund of knowledge. Text 30. Therefore, O Arjuna, cast aside your fever of inertia. Offer your actions to me in complete knowledge of the Supreme Self within, and fight without yearning for ownership or profit. Text 31. Those who faithfully act in accordance with my teaching, free from envy, attain freedom from actions, reactions. Text 32. Those who disregard my teachings due to resentment, however, are thus bewildered by this knowledge. Know that such people whose minds are so confused are lost. All right, so now let's talk about these in some detail. In verse 28, one who knows the truth about how material nature generates action remains detached. So this is basically what I described before in my elaboration of the previous verse, and how to understand what's actually going on. When you step back and think about how you analyze, how is it that this is not me per se, not me proper, but rather the qualities of material nature that are engaged with one another, and I'm kind of like the witness here. Well, automatically now you get a little sense of detachment. It becomes more like you're watching a film, actors on a stage, even though it's your own mind and body that you're watching. Every so often in my yoga classes, I will set people up in Sphinx pose. So if you're not familiar, Sphinx pose looks just like a Sphinx. You put your elbows underneath your shoulders, you prop your heart and your shoulders and your head up, you look slightly forward, like just past your fingers. And you use a minimum amount of muscle strength to keep, just what you need to keep your shoulders from creeping up to your ears. You don't want everything collapsing down. So you're resting bone on bone. And I suggest to everyone that you just relax your feet, relax your knees, thighs, hips, and belly down on the mat. Just support the front end of your body with your skeleton. And check it out. You've got a skeleton in your body. You've got a skeleton in your body. You're walking around with a skeleton inside your body. Just feel that for a moment. Just do that. It's weird, isn't it? You don't really think about this very often, do you? But you're walking around all day, every day, with a skeleton inside your body. Next time you're walking down the street, it's a beautiful day, you're just like, doing your thing, take the earbuds out of your ear, put your cell phone down, just walk and feel your skeleton in your body. You're going to feel like the Terminator all of a sudden, because we're riding around in a machine made of material energy. We're the passenger in the machine, the witness to everything that we're driving by. But the machine is not us. And when you actually step into that headspace of experiencing your material body as a machine you're riding around in, as opposed to you thinking that it's actually you and that you are walking and you are listening to your digital device or looking at it, or you are catching the bus or calling a Uber or whatever it is that you're doing. When you watch yourself, who's not really yourself because it's your body and your mind and your intelligence and your ego doing its thing, you get some distance automatically. It just happens right away. So if you want to learn detachment from the modes of material nature and experience them as acting amongst themselves, just remember, you've got a skeleton in your body. Any questions? While I am waiting for your, oh, here they go, this is super weird. But sometimes I look around and think, what if I was dead right now? Well, Shana, if it helps, I can assure you that you're not. But it's something that could happen at any moment, which is a little bit of a buzzkill if you just, always think any minute now I could die. But unfortunately, that's just a true fact. And it does, or I can see how thinking that in that way would in fact foster that kind of detachment as you have described, that for you thinking about it in this way. So here's kind of a additional way to think about it. Your body actually is dead already. It's matter. It's no more alive than the table that my laptop is sitting on. It appears to be alive because you're in it. But as soon as you leave it, it reveals itself for what it really is, dead matter. So you can think of, like, what if my body was dead right now, and then realize, oh, wait a minute, it is. It appears to be alive. That is to say, it has all the living functions going on in it because I'm in it. But all those functions will cease the moment I leave. So that's another way to think about it, that it's not you that dies, it's the body that dies. Okay. If everything, oh, this is so nice. I'm so happy to see your questions to the point where I actually have to scroll back to catch someone else's. But keep those cards and letters coming in. I will get to every one of your questions. Okay, if everything is material forces acting, what about spiritual forces? Yes. So the spiritual force is what animates the material body. And everything ultimately is spiritual, which is to say that it does not appear to be spiritual. It's lost its spiritual quality to our vision because our eyes are made of matter, and therefore we are now constrained. Our vision is now constrained to seeing matter. And in a more evolved state of consciousness, we may develop the ability to see subtle matter. We may develop a kind of metaphysical vision. In yoga philosophy, spiritual energy precedes material energy. Material energy is a transformation of spiritual energy. So it is created from spiritual energy. So in that sense, everything is ultimately spiritual. And when we re-spiritualize our own consciousness, when we extract ourselves from the influence of material nature, then material nature itself regains its spiritual quality, which is, or to put it another way, we experience material nature in its original spiritual state. So we can spiritualize our bodies, we can spiritualize our experience of the world through this cultivation of detachment from material influence and the elevation of consciousness beyond the influence of material nature. So the spiritual forces are what animate this body. You could say that before matter, there is spirit. There's pure consciousness, which is spiritual. And matter is contingent on consciousness rather than the other way around. The modern scientific paradigm is that consciousness arises as a chance combination of material elements. So consciousness is contingent on matter, and therefore consciousness ceases to be when the body dies. But the Bhagavad-gita tells us exactly the opposite, that actually matter is derivative of consciousness. And as matter goes through its transformations, coming into being, staying for some time, going out of being, consciousness remains always. And when one form of matter, such as a material body, is no longer capable of supporting consciousness, when the machine breaks down to the point where it just doesn't work anymore, and consciousness can no longer be supported by this particular machine, just like a car that breaks down over time, and then you have to get a new car. Similarly, the life force, which is spiritual, trades in the old car for a new car. So I hope that answers your question. Shana, yes, the feeling of looking at everything from somewhere else. Yeah, it changes your vision. Right, thank you. All right. Kate asks, weird enough, I have had that thought before. When I rub my eye and feel my ocular cavity, I sometimes go, whoa, there's a skull under this skin. And even when I feel the distance or detachment from my body, one thing always gets me stuck in there, pain. Yeah. So we take our bodies for granted when it feels good. It doesn't demand our attention when everything is healthy and working fine. But as soon as there's a problem, then the body gets all of our attention, and we feel very much like what happens to our body is happening to us. And that is a real challenge for developing detachment, in the sense that now you're really identifying with your body because your attachment to your body has been revealed through the agency of pain. And it also helps us cultivate detachment. It's a wake-up call, because who wants to be stuck in a body that's subject to pain? Nobody. So the very first chapter of the Bhagavad-gita is called the Yoga of Arjuna's Despair. He's experiencing pain. It's not a physical pain, but it has physical symptoms. He's experiencing psychological, emotional pain, and it's resulting in a nervous breakdown that's making his heart beat like crazy, and his hair is standing on end. He's shaking. He can't hold on to his weapons anymore. He basically is freaking out. And this despair, this condition of intense emotional and psychological pain is going to be his impetus to spiritual life. It's going to bring him closer to his true nature. Oftentimes, if we are not religiously inclined, then we don't pray when things are going well. But when things are really, really not going well, then even if we don't think logically, rationally that it will do any good just because, just in case, then we will pray. So pain becomes an impetus to spiritual life, even though it reinforces our sense of identification, or at least it confirms just how identified with our bodies we really are. Okay. All right, yeah, Shana, thank you very much for that comment. Yeah, it's almost like you could be anywhere, because you could. You could be in this body, you could be in another body. All right. So here's something for you to think about. What things that happen in your life help you to develop detachment, or the realization that you are not this material body? And then conversely, what things might happen in your life that reinforce your sense of identity with your body, that make you feel all the more identified with it or attached to it? So you can share your thoughts now if you like, but it would be even better, at least as far as I'm concerned, if you were to share your thoughts on the Facebook group and engage in a kind of discussion with one another. The Facebook group, Bhagavad-gita Virtual Satsang, in case you haven't checked that out. For those of you who are new, you're going to be getting an email from me tomorrow with the links to the audio only and the video version of the recordings of this. And in that email, you will get a link to the Facebook group, and just ask to join, and I will be happy to make you a member of that group, so that the discussion of the satsang, the gathering of those who are interested in speaking and learning about the truth, can continue there. Okay. Text 29. Those who are bewildered by the influence of material nature become attached to material activities. So this is the result of confused action. Those who are bewildered, confused by the influence of material nature and act accordingly, become attached to those actions. They become attached to material activities. And a wise person, the wise, should not disturb those who are fooled into identifying with material nature due to a poor fund of knowledge. So this brings up an important distinction. The distinction between those who are absolutely convinced that this world is all there is, you only live once, so you better enjoy it, and who are dedicated to the proposition of, I am the one who is acting, and I'm going to act in such a way that I will enjoy the fruits of my actions. A wise person does not make an extraneous effort to try to dislodge someone who is absolutely convinced of this, that actually that's not going to work out. In the previous episodes, we talked about exemplary action and how Krishna advises that encouraging people to act and being discreet or subtle about engaging people in actions that will be purifying to them, that will be uplifting to them. And by acting oneself in such a way as to set an example for uplifting action. In this way, you can engage with people who are absorbed in material life and convinced of material life. This is particularly challenging with families. My family members, my extended family, my aunts, uncles, people I don't speak to every day, they want to hear from me once in a while, and they want to know how I'm doing. And when they ask how I'm doing, they're not asking how my spiritual progress is going. They're not really asking about whether or not I have become self-realized. or developed some kind of spiritual senses by which I can see this spiritual nature of the material world. If doing that sort of thing makes me happy, then great, they're happy that I'm happy. But they're measuring my happiness from on a standard of material happiness. While I'm busy with my spiritual pursuits, they also want to know that I'm earning a comfortable living and that my body is functioning properly, otherwise known as healthy. Because if you've got your health, you've got everything. And, well, health is also a temporary condition. I don't try to convince them that their material lives are a waste of time, because that would just be a waste of time. It would be injurious to my relationship with them and would do nothing to persuade them to take up spiritual life. So I act towards them with love and compassion, understanding the relationship differently than they understand it, seeing the world differently than they see it. And, I just try to inspire them by my example that happiness can come from spiritual life, and I'll find some way, if at all possible, to engage them in something spiritual, even if they don't know that it's a spiritual thing that is ultimately for their benefit. And there you go. That's it. That's according to Krishna, what a wise person is supposed to do. And I try to be a wise guy, so that's what I'm trying to do. Now, the next three verses are kind of a different set. The first three verses are one part of this cluster, and this next group of verses is another part now. Now, Krishna is trying to wrap this portion of his teaching up in order to convince Arjuna that he should act from a position of knowledge. So here we go, verse 30. Therefore, O Arjuna, cast aside your fever of inertia. Remember, Arjuna's had like a nervous breakdown, and it produced a sort of deer in the headlights moment where he is frozen. He can't do anything. His body feels like it's on fire, but the result is that he's become immobilized. He cannot find the motivation to engage in this battle. And Krishna is trying to convince him to snap out of it. Offer your actions to me in complete knowledge of the Supreme Self within, and fight without yearning for ownership or profit. So, break this down a little bit more. Earlier in this third chapter, Krishna describes the art of sacrifice, that one makes one's work spiritual or spiritualizes action by offering one's actions as a sacrifice to Vishnu, to the highest truth. Remember, he specifically said, work as a sacrifice for Vishnu must be performed. Otherwise, all work is binding in this world. Or in other words, when you engage in Ishvara Pranidhana, when you make your work an offering, you offer your life force, everything you do to the Supreme Person, there's no karmic reaction for that. It's an action that doesn't generate a reaction. Otherwise, everything else you do will produce a reaction that you will be obliged to experience, whether it's good or bad or indifferent. So now he's coming back to this idea that someone who is in complete knowledge understands that the offering of one's action to the Lord in the heart, to the Param Atma, this is where Ishvara lives, within our own hearts. by making what we do an offering to that person, then your actions are informed by knowledge. Your actions do not generate a reaction. And it's action that is performed without attachment, which is to say without yearning for ownership or profit, which is a little paradoxical because after all, Arjuna's fighting for a kingdom. He's supposed to be a ruler. He's supposed to be the king or a prince. In this case, his brother, his older brother will be the king. But still, this is a fight. The whole reason they're fighting in the first place is because there's an argument about where the line of succession will go, through which part of the dynasty, which family members will the crown pass. And he's fighting with his cousins for this. And you would think, well, you know, if I'm fighting in order to ensure that I will be the ruler of the kingdom, then I will own everything and I will be wealthy, and because that's like how kings roll usually. But here Krishna is saying, without yearning for ownership, for proprietorship, or for profit, for any material gain. Krishna is gradually moving towards the idea of Arjuna being an instrument of divine will, rather than thinking from the standpoint of material consciousness that he's just fighting for a kingdom for himself and his brothers. Elevating Arjuna's motivation from a selfish motivation, or even a motivation of extended selfishness, his concern for his other family members, to a transcendental position. Text 31. Those who faithfully act in accordance with my teaching, free from envy, attain freedom from actions, reactions. So I was speaking actually earlier with a few people today about envy and being irritated by the success of others, and how this can sometimes be a challenge for me. I don't really worry about my ego so much, because I trust Krishna to put me in my place, to remind me that I'm actually not the greatest anything, should my ego get out of control. But I do sometimes concern myself with the issue of envy. And ultimately, envy rolls back to not just envy of the person who has more than me, who's more successful than I am, who's greater than I am in this way or the other thing, but it ultimately rolls back to envy of the greatest person. Or, as we'll see in the next verse, resentment of the teaching that says, I'm not the doer. I'm not the one making things happen. Resentment of the idea, or envy of those, or envy of the person who is actually in control of things and who is actually successful, and resentment that I am subordinate to these laws of material nature, to these interactions of the mode, to the influence of the qualities of material nature that make me think I like this, I don't like that, this is right, that is wrong, this person's good, that person's bad, etc., etc., etc. This, for me at least, is really where I focus my inner work, or at least I have to focus my inner work, is on these 2 points, and these 2 verses particularly resonate with me. The next verse is, those who disregard my teachings due to resentment, however, are thus bewildered by this knowledge. They just don't get it. It sounds so foreign. The idea that you're going to work but not enjoy the results of your actions. The idea that you're not actually even performing the actions at all. It's not you. People hear this and it's so counterintuitive that it just bewilders their minds rather than informs their spiritual lives. Know that such people whose minds are so confused are lost. Okay, well, I don't want to be one of those lost people. So this is what I have to work on in order to attain freedom from the reactions to my actions. I need to work on envy and resentment. Krishna will come back to this idea of envy and resentment, amplified as desire and hate, as the original sin, or the Bhagavad-gita's version of original sin, as the cause of one's becoming bewildered by the modes of material nature, and thus coming under the influence of illusion, of identifying with material nature. So these two problems are really the root cause of all the other problems that derive from the misidentification of the self with the not self, of thinking, I am this body, I am the doer. What happens to this body happens to me. I'm the one who's making things happen. I'm going to make things happen the way I think they ought to happen. Okay. So this is what we talked about. More karma yoga, confused action, the action that bewilders the mind and reinforces our sense of misidentification with material nature. Disciplined action, action informed by knowledge and performed with detachment as a result of that knowledge. The result being that one brings us in closer to the attainment of liberation, freedom from actions, reactions, and the other resulting in being lost in this material world. Okay, question, here we go. So how do we go about our everyday life not attached to results when so much of our material life depends on it? I have to pay for my mortgage, buy the dog's food, feed myself. How does one not be attached to this? Good question. So we cultivate, first of all, we cultivate it gradually by reframing what we're doing in terms of why. So for example, your dog depends on you. You have a duty to feed your dog. And your dog's a person in a dog body, spirit soul, just like you. So because this person in a dog's body is dependent on you, you actually have to take that responsibility as a matter of duty. And if you engage in a spiritual activity such as offering your food to Vishnu, remember, everything, and if you go back into the third chapter, Krishna specifically says, everything you eat, everything you give away, everything you offer in charity, whatever it is you're doing, make that a sacrifice to me. So that's actually a spiritual practice, the idea of preparing food, understanding that it's produced by the qualities of material nature, and that it is the energy of the Supreme Person, Vishnu, transformed into food, which you then can prepare and offer back to the source of your good fortune in the form of food. All right, now you take some of that food that's particularly palatable for your dog, and you feed the dog spiritual food. Now the person in the dog body, even though they don't know it, makes spiritual advancement. You've managed to help the person in your dog body, and you have not disturbed them in the process. You have to pay your mortgage. Well, why? Well, because if you didn't pay your mortgage, you wouldn't have a house. What would be so bad about that? Well, then you wouldn't have a place to live. Well, then what would be so bad about that? Well, then you'd be exposed to the elements. What's so bad about that? Well, then you'd die. Understand that maintaining this material body in the form inside a shelter from the material elements is necessary in order for you to make spiritual advancement during the course of the great opportunity of your human life. So now, why are you paying the mortgage? Because I want to enjoy my house? No, because I need to have a house to live in order to make spiritual advancement. I need to create a sacred space in my house. So it's really a matter of reframing by motivation. And we will see in the Bhagavad-gita that Krishna is going to take Arjuna through a progression of changes of motivation. It won't change what Arjuna does. It'll change why he does it. And that's what spiritualizes an activity. Not changing the activity. The activity may or may not change. But you can take this, in many cases, the same exact activity and spiritualize it by changing your motivation for action. So does that help? Yes. Dovetailing material needs with spiritual forces. Is this like reframing? Yes. Another word for this would be dovetailing. You take whatever it is you do and you find a way to do that same thing, but with spiritual motivation rather than a material motivation. And that way you spiritualize action. So yes, dovetailing would be another word for that. Good? Other questions as we head into the last few minutes of our time together here this evening? If you have questions after the fact, of course, please send them to me or put them on the Facebook page. You can write to me if you want to send the question personally to me, hari@harikirtan.com. You can also go to our virtual Bhagavad-gita virtual satsang on Facebook. Post a question there. You don't have to get it answered by me. It's like, I'm not the only guy here who knows something. There are other people in this community who have realizations about the Bhagavad-gita that they can share. You may be one of those people. Go to the Facebook page, share your realization about this cluster of verses. Pop a question in there. It's fun and easy, like a chia pet. Hey, here's another resource for you. In the category of being envious of others, I read a really nice blog post by Rukmini Walker. It's titled, "You Are a Sacred Spark of the One Supreme Whole," and you can find it on the Urban Devi website. So the Urban Devi website is dedicated to the intersection of devotional wisdom and 21st century life, specifically for women. And I know many of you out there are women, therefore this may be particular interest to you. urbandevi.com, her particular essay, "You Are a Sacred Spark of One Supreme Whole," addresses very nicely this idea of how to reframe the experience of envy and resentment on a micro level when we experience it in the comparison of oneself to others. And she has some really nice quotes about comparison and how that will rob you of your joy if you let it. Anyway, so there's your other resource for this evening. I am very, very happy to be heading back up to Frederick, Maryland and Saul Yoga for a Yoga Sutras immersion weekend in a few weeks. That's going to be on Saturday and Sunday, July 14th and 15th. You can get all the details under the trainings tab at Saul Yoga's website, or you can go to my website under events and check it out there. So this will be Saturday and Sunday, basically all day, with a break for lunch, obviously, or at least a 15-minute bathroom break or two. Anyway, a introduction to and then an in-depth study of the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali. That's at Saul Yoga in Frederick. We are still accepting applications to enroll in the Advanced Studies program and 300-hour yoga teacher training that I'm doing at Sky House Yoga in beautiful Silver Spring, Maryland. I'll be doing that with Ashley Lateki Ellenbass. Now, here's something I didn't tell you before about this. This advanced studies program includes some independent courses. So these are part of the teacher training, but you can also take them as independent standalone courses if you're a yoga teacher for continuing education credit, or if you're a yoga practitioner to deepen your experience of yoga in these areas. And one area that I'm very excited about is the pranayama course that we're doing with Braja Kishori, who's very, very expert, studies with expert teachers in India. She goes to India for like long periods of time to study with her teachers there. She is going to be teaching a 24-hour course spread out over weekends from September 29th to February 9th. Once again, you can go to my website, get all the details there. So that's one course. And then the other course we're offering as a standalone course is the Advanced Physical and Energetic Anatomy course with Michelle Lee. She brings a lot of experience of connecting the physical body to the metaphysical body, especially in the Chinese meridian conception of energy flows. Also studied with very advanced teachers, yin yoga, and we'll use yin yoga as a way of teaching both physical and energetic anatomy. That's a 28-hour course from September 30th to March 10th. Next week, we're going to conclude the third chapter, Karma Yoga. We'll speak about harmonizing action to nature. We will also find out who or what the all-devouring enemy of mankind really is, in addition to the obvious all-devouring enemies of mankind that we experience almost every day these days. And then we will speak about reasoning beyond reason. These are verses 33 through 43 of the third chapter of the Bhagavad-gita. And any last comments or questions? All righty. We are running just a couple of minutes over, so thank you for continuing to play in stoppage time. I'm looking forward to seeing you all next time. And until then, I hope you are all well. And I look forward to seeing you all again soon. Okay. End meeting for all.